Okay, hello there. Right, today I'm not quite on the ball. As you can hear, my voice is slightly shagged. Who would have thought that sniffing a 1974 copy of The Joy of Sex, a well-thumbed one I might add, might result in me almost dropping a lung. But there we are. These are the risks I take for you, dear viewer, so you can avoid such problems. In all honesty, it's nothing to do with that. My main job is ferrying children to school, and they usually contain various microbes that I then inhale within that enclosed environment and get no end of maladies. But anyway, let's push on. We have to be strong. Okay, so right, today I've got not just one book to review, nor two, but three of the devils. Hopefully there's a thumbnail that I've created that will show them. And they're all Jack Vance. So based on all of your recommendations over the last year, I decided to dip my toe into his work. So this Christmas just gone, my parents got me a little mini haul of some vintage Jack Vance. So I thought, where the hell shall I begin? I know there's a few different series of books that he did and some standalone ones, but I thought, let's begin with some short stories. Look at that beautiful cover. I'll bang up just these covers probably. I might try to find some other ones as we go along, but it's whether I can be asked. But this was quite a lovely cover, I thought. Love those colours. Delicious, in fact. Anyway, so I dipped into this book and it blew my fucking mind. Absolutely loved it. So I'm not going to talk about all of the stories, but I'm going to talk about my favourite one, which just so happens to be the very first one that appears in this collection. From 1958, I think it was first published, The Miracle Workers. Bastard. Medicine. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that this story epitomizes what people love about Jack Vance, or the Dying Earth series specifically. So we're looking at a formerly high technology race of humans that have since been brought low. So they've lost their technology and they've descended into not savagery, but a kind of feudal medieval scenario. So we encounter this story on a colony world 1,600 years after some kind of calamity. So I think there's been a space battle of some kind, and a certain proportion of humans have made it down to the surface, and in a panic they've created all of these kind of strongholds, these kind of castles, to protect themselves from the war that was going on at the time. 1,600 years later, however, and they're fighting each other now. Technology doesn't really exist as it did. So as I said before, they've descended to a medieval setting. They fight with swords and various other medieval weaponry. They have suits of armor, horse-drawn carriages, that kind of thing. But they have with them wizards of a sort. They're called jinxmen. And this is the part that I absolutely loved. So it's these wizards are kind of practicing a form of magic that's they're using telepathy really, but also a form of voodoo. So these wizards carry with them these cabinets filled with little figurines that relate to certain key figures of the enemy. I don't know how they've acquired this material, like hair and skin cells, things like that. But using that, they can cast spells, a voodoo kind of spell on these people. They can also summon demons using a form of kind of mass hallucination. So they can make parts of their army believe that they're inhabited by this demon that gives them supernatural powers, but probably just stops them from being able to feel pain and things like that. So yeah, I won't tell you actually what the story's about, really, other than the fact that it involves the indigenous population of aliens that were there before the humans arrived, the first folk. So there's interesting things going on there, but I was just really captivated by these amazing ideas, but also the way the environment is described within a very short story. I had a really good image of the way this world looked and felt and smelt. It was wonderful. The color of the sky, the color of the sun, these moss-strewn valleys, so original for me. Really, really loved it. In fact, it reminded me of a short film, animated film called Jibaro, which it's on Netflix, the Love, Death and Robots series of animated stuff. And just the setting of that was amazing. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. I'll put a little thing there. Incredible, that little short film. Absolutely nothing really to do with this short story, but for me the two were kind of marrying up in terms of aesthetics and kind of feel, I suppose. Yeah, so that first story blew my mind apart. Some of the other short stories in here, the next one was Moon's Rise, was about a lighthouse keeper that appears to be hallucinating, perhaps imagining people turning up on his remote little island. That was quite nice. Telek was about a kind of battle between humans and telekinetic gods in a way. It's a bit like Slan, the A. Van Vogt story, and the battle between those. That was okay, but it wasn't anything too special. There were a couple of other ones that were slightly more esoteric as well, that were quite thought-provoking, like one where the Earth had passed through a field of non-causality, so everything had gone completely mental. The laws of physics no longer held true, and things were just going completely mad. So the only people that could survive in that altered dimension were people that were actually clinically insane. It was quite interesting, a reversal between sanity and insanity. Pardon me, excuse me. The last couple towards the end are actually excerpts from some of his other series. So Cudgel's saga, there was a short story or a section of that story, and another one from the Dying Earth series. So those two gave me a nice glimpse into those two other series, which I'm really interested in reading maybe later this year. But for a short story collection, I don't like having excerpts from other books, but for my purposes, it was really useful. So when it comes to rating this, I have to give it a sterling 4 out of 5. I mean, I'd give that first story 5 out of 5 any day of the week. I absolutely loved it. But yeah, it was let down slightly by some of those excerpts from other books. I think that's a kind of a cheap thing, but it was good for me because it gave me an insight into those other books. And some of the others were kind of interesting, but didn't do too much for me. But the writing, imagination, the painting of these various worlds was magnificent. Oh, medicine. Okay, next up, let's get this little fucker out. We've got The Blue World. Okay, so I read this just because of the cover. I thought, well, looks exciting, doesn't it? Bears very little resemblance to the actual story in terms of the fact that he's brandishing an axe there. I mean, that doesn't happen in the thing. This monster could perhaps be the creature that they're being plagued by in the story, but who knows? Anyway, they always take liberties with these covers, I know. So in some ways, it's like a cross between the movie Jaws and Waterworld. Jaws, wonderful. Waterworld, not so good. But it's following a colony, really, on a world that's entirely ocean. There's no solid land whatsoever. The only way they can exist is upon these floats. So these these kind of giant plants, a bit like giant lily pads, that float on the surface in these kind of strings, these archipelagos. And so they formed this community on a series of these floats. Now, they've been on this planet for over 200 years or so, and similar to the miracle workers, they've ended up here through accident, really. This is a spoiler, but it's something that you'll realize right at the very beginning. Basically, the forebearers of this society have come from... They were heading for a penal world, so they were all prisoners. So therefore, crashing on this planet did them a favour. They ended up being able to live out their lives on this other world, which is actually a form of paradise, really. But there must have been some hardships at the beginning. And so interestingly, they are divided into various castes that don't have that much relevance when we meet them. So it's about 11 or 12, 13 generations on from the original crashed colonists. And so these castes relate to their previous crimes. So you have hoodwinks and larcenists and incendiarists and things like that. But the castes in present day mean nothing to... There's nothing to do with their former crimes. But it's interesting. There's the vestige of their past, and they have no idea that they were formerly prisoners. Similar in some ways to, what was it, the Clans of the Alphane Moon by Philip K. Dick. Similar differentiation of clans based on their diagnosis, that was, from that mental institution that was disbanded. Okay, so the water world aspect is the fact that they're having to subsist with very little on these pads. So everything they live with, all the objects they have, there's a few things that they were able to retain from the crashed ship, but useless stuff really. But the archives about the first colonists, their experiences, things like that. Everything else has to be drawn out of the sea various ways. Very ingenious usage of stuff. Another interesting byproduct of their own bodies, their bones, is used because it happens to be one of the hardest materials they get to work with. So tools that are formed from bones are quite common. The fact that these people are wearing loincloths and that are probably similar. They don't really describe too much about what they're wearing in this book, other than a few official people. So I like that bare bones way. They're working with what they've got. So I think it's possibly similar to Waterworld. I never sat through the whole film. I thought it was fucking dire, but there we are. So the Jaws aspect is the fact that they've been plagued by a beast the whole time, King Kragan. So it's a form of sea monster, but an intelligent bastard. And at some point in the distant past, they've made friends with it. And so instead of the beast attacking them for food, because they like eating these kind of sea sponges that the humans are cultivating for their own sustenance, they've decided that occasionally they'll let King Kragan have a measure of sponges on this float, and then another parcel the next day on another one, that kind of thing. But over the last 200 years, their feeding has created an even bigger monster. So King Kragan has become massive, and to all intents and purposes appears to be both immortal and indestructible, especially with the weapons that they have that are forged from, sharpened bones and shells and things like that. An interesting side aspect to the story is the idea of these communication towers that are placed on each of these floats, and they're operated by hoodwinkers. And it's an ingenious form of communication in that it's basically flashing lights or patterns of light that communicate words. And so therefore information can pass up and down this great big long archipelago relatively quickly, with quite a rudimentary form of communication. Now, one of the hoodwink operators is called Sklar Hast. In my mind, I was calling him Skylar Hast. So I'm going to call him Skylar, if you don't mind. He's a young hoodwink operator. He's really good at operating the machine. He can do it really quickly. And he has a kind of love interest who is the daughter of an intercessor. Now, these intercessors are the bastards that back in the day made friends with King Kragan. And so their caste, if you will, they have various secrets about their dealings with King Kragan. Basically, they can communicate with him, supposedly. And so they're the ones that placate King Kragan. So Skylar wants to get with the daughter of, so no, that's wrong. So one of the intercessors, one of these King Kragan worshippers, also wants to get with the daughter that's Skylar's after. So they have a battle at the beginning in terms of who's going to win, not to win her heart or anything, but for the master position of hoodwinker on that island. I'm sorry, I'm really rambling here, but it's interesting stuff, I assure you. So yeah, the love interest, her father is the master hoodwinker of that float. So Skylar challenges him to a duel. And so what they do is quite interestingly, it's a really nice way of putting in some of the lore of the history of their society. And so they have to communicate passages from these old Analects or whatever they are. And so we get glimpses of their past through that little section. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I'm not going to give anything away, but Skylar has the guts full of it. He's constantly thwarted by these intercessors because Skylar wants to kill King Kragan. And the intercessors don't want that. One, because they're fearful that King Kragan can't be destroyed and it'll just wipe them all out. But also they don't want to lose their venerated positions as intercessors, because that's all they do. They don't have to do any hard graft. That's all they do. They walk around with their cloaks and apparently beckon this King Kragan, to various places they want him to be. So Skylar, over the course of perhaps a decade after that, this battle, forms his own archipelago elsewhere. And it's an interesting interplay between the two. Okay, so the last thing I'll say is that I absolutely love the story. I really do. It was a page turner, very novel, unique, interesting politics going on, allegiances and just the way the society worked. Loved it. I loved the idea of King Kragan as well. It would have made a wonderful film, I think, as well. The only thing is, the only possible fly in the ointment, shall we say, is that some of the technological leaps that Skylar and his society make later on are perhaps a little far-fetched, considering what they've got to work with. Also, the amount of information they can divine from the past that's written and coded in these volumes of books. They managed to, for example, this is a slight spoiler, I suppose, they managed to smelt iron from boiling blood, basically. So getting the iron from the hemoglobin in blood, and eventually, after gallons of the stuff has been worked through, they managed to create enough iron to make usable things. Yeah, that's far-fetched for sure. But anyway, aside from all that, bloody loved it. Let's rate the bugger. I mean, again, this is going to be a 4 out of 5, but really strong. I really loved it, and after those two books, I'm like, yeah, I'm a Jack Vance fan, and I'm going to start gobbling them up. However, I need a drink. Yes, however, the third book wasn't quite so much to my liking, The Languages of Pao. Now, I won't talk too much about this because I didn't really find it that interesting. It was interesting in some ways, but it was slightly harder to get through. So Pao is a planet that's a kind of paradise, really. They've got a massive population, and again, these are humans. I thought they were a kind of an alien race, but I assume these are, again, humans in the far future. Humans that have been spread. There's been a diaspora of diaspora. Is that the way you pronounce it? I don't know. But they've spread across the galaxy, and they formed their own worlds. Then they've become their own. Perhaps they have become alien from other humans. Perhaps, if only in terms of culture and society, vastly different. So the inhabitants of Pao are very, very passive. And so they all put up with a hell of a lot and not complain about it. So mass starvation, genocide, invasion from other planets. They take it all on the chin. They don't give a damn. But they are ruled over by a very small, it's kind of like a world king, I suppose. At the very beginning of the book, the king is poisoned by probably, your fate is evident at the beginning, by his brother. The brother then tries to kill or set up the king's son as the one that did it. And so after this is just political maneuvering up the yin-yang into a mysterious wizard-like fellow called Palafox. Now, Palafox is a devious little git. And basically he uses the brother's ambitions to garner his own, if you will. So the whole thing is about creating languages. So Palafox devises different languages to be taught to certain subsections of Pao's population to engineer new mentalities. So new ideologies, philosophies, drives in life. So creating traders and military engineers, things like that. Otherwise, the inhabitants of Pao are completely passive. They just farm, they eat, they live. The perfect way of living, I think. But of course, you're always prey to traders that you've got to pay through the nose for stuff. Other races that want to come down, slaughter you and take over. So on the surface of it, this is a great idea. It will give Pao some power. But Palafox, the devious wizard git that he is, has other ideas. But I won't talk about them. You'll have to read it yourself if you can get through it. I mean, it's a relatively short book. But yeah, I didn't find it that interesting. Also, as vividly illustrated as some of these worlds were in the short stories, Pao is more or less invisible. There's barely anything there. You get the idea that it is a paradise of sorts, but not much going on really. I didn't really feel for the characters at all. The son of the dead king, we follow him throughout the book, but it's just an oddball really. Doesn't really. I think the idea is that he's constantly falling back on his passivity, but he needs to be a leader, and eventually he gets there. Spoiler, but yeah, as a character, I didn't feel anything for him and didn't give a shit really. So, okay, Languages of Pao. That said, I just love Jack Vance now. So, but saying that, I was going to give him 3 out of 5. I'm going to give this 2 out of 5, just because I found it a bit boring. The idea of engineering a society based solely on language is very interesting, but although that should have been the crux of the whole thing, it was lost within the political maneuvering and just boring crap, if you will. So there we are. 3 books in one, and I'm on death's door. What's going on here? But anyway, let's leave it there. I've got a banging headache now. Feel sorry for me, please. Sorry, I'm being a dick. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully be back next time. I'm reading another book now. What am I reading? Oh, it's another short story collection. Lots of different authors. Some really crackers in the cracking authors, shall I say? J.G. Ballard, Philip K. Dick, James Blish, Ursula Le Guin. So yeah, I'll review that soon, hopefully. So until next time, cheerio. Look after yourselves. first colonists, their experiences, things like that. God damn it. The miracle workers. Bastard. An interesting interplay between the two. God, excuse me. Oh, this is going well, isn't it? Oh, Lord.